A new Netflix show about a 13-year-old boy stabbing a girl is now shaping government policy in the UK, despite having almost no basis in reality. And that should alarm all of us. Netflix's miniseries Adolescence has blown up lately. It's on track to be one of their most watched shows ever. It's about a 13-year-old boy who stabs a female classmate after supposedly being influenced by online manosphere content. Here's what's crazy. The UK Parliament and Prime Minister are talking about showing this fictional series to students across the country. And look, the acting is great. The cinematography is stunning. And that one-shot filming technique that they use is extremely impressive. But underneath all the artistic flair is a seriously flawed portrayal that gets both youth violence and online communities all wrong. When we start using fiction to shape real policies, we've got to take a closer look at what the show gets right, what it gets dangerously wrong, and how we might actually help young men today without demonizing them. Here's the thing. There's never been a single documented case of a 13-year-old boy from a stable home stabbing a female classmate because of incel content. Not one. Yet, millions of viewers now think that this is a common threat. The show gives us Jamie, a seemingly normal 13-year-old boy who does something horrific to a female classmate. The story strongly suggests that the online manosphere content turned him violent. But let's be honest about something uncomfortable. This specific scenario has never happened in real life, not even once. Knife crime is definitely a serious issue in the UK, but what the reality is looks nothing like what we see in Adolescence. When you actually look at who's been involved in knife violence in the UK, Jamie's profile, a white, middle-class kid from a stable family with no previous issues, is among the least likely to do something like this. And by focusing on his profile, the show distracts us from the real factors behind youth violence in Britain. Things like poverty, like gang pressure, and a lack of opportunities. And think about it. How likely is it that a 13-year-old boy would be deeply embedded in incel communities? Research shows that most self-identified incels are older. They're usually between 18 and 30, with years of social isolation and rejection. A kid Jamie's age just hasn't experienced yet. And don't get me wrong, the creators of Adolescence have every right to tell the story that they want. Fiction doesn't have to perfectly mirror reality. But when a made-up drama starts informing real policy discussions with Parliament and the Prime Minister, that's when we need to pay attention to where the story departs from the facts. This matters even more when they're talking about showing this to students across the UK. Because when fiction starts shaping how we understand real social problems, we need to ask ourselves, is this story clarifying things or just confusing us about what young people are actually facing? One of the biggest things Adolescence misses is any real look at the mental health struggles that many isolated young men face online. The research tells a very different story than what we see on the screen. Studies show that incels have really high rates of autism, around 30%, and alarming rates of suicide. According to a 2024 UK government report, 1 in 5 incels contemplate suicide every single day, and nearly half report suicidal ideation overall, which is compared to just 4 or 5% of the general adult population who report such thoughts in an entire year, though the rates are higher among young adults, which is more around 10 to 12%. Around 30% are on the autism spectrum. That's 30 times higher than the general population. And yet, Adolescence just portrays them as potential killers, not as vulnerable young men in crisis. And I'm not excusing harmful beliefs or behaviors, but we need to understand that these online communities often attract men who are already struggling with serious mental health issues. And by only focusing on potential violence while ignoring all of the mental health issues and the crisis, adolescence misses a chance to address why young men turn to these spaces in the first place. There's also this growing trend of young guys feeling disillusioned with dating and looking for community online. This often comes from rejection and social pressures and just not having any guidance on how to navigate relationships. These online spaces can give them a sense of belonging, but they can also reinforce some pretty negative attitudes. By ignoring both the mental health crisis and the social factors pushing young men into these spaces, adolescence misses the real story. In the show Adolescence, all the manosphere groups are treated like one big toxic soup. But in reality, incels, red pill followers, and Andrew Tate fans often can't stand each other. And understanding these differences is key to addressing the real problems. The show makes a huge mistake by treating all online male communities as basically the same thing. There's this telling scene where a female detective dismisses incels as that Andrew Tate shite, which shows a complete misunderstanding of these very different groups. In reality, incels, red pill followers, and figures like Andrew Tate represent a totally different philosophy and often actively challenge each other online. Incels typically follow the black pill worldview, this really dark perspective that your looks determine everything about your dating success and nothing can change that. Where red pill communities focus on strategies to navigate dating, while guys like Tate push a hypermasculine, success-oriented approach. This is obviously an oversimplified analysis, and a much more nuanced discussion is required here. My main point is these distinctions matter because they reflect different underlying issues and need different approaches to address. By lumping them all together, the show not only spreads misinformation, but makes it harder to develop effective ways to help young men who are drawn to these various communities. One thing that's actually realistic in adolescence is how it shows the term incel being used to bully and isolate young boys. And yet, this crucial insight is completely overlooked in the policy discussions. Maybe the most authentic part of adolescence is how it shows the term incel being weaponized against young boys. In the show, Katie, the victim, had been bullying Jamie online, calling him an incel and publicly humiliating him. This reflects something troubling that's really happening. Terms like incel have become powerful tools for social exclusion, especially for young boys who are already struggling with self-esteem and trying to fit in. The show captures how social media amplifies this humiliation, with Jamie seeing hundreds of classmates liking Katie's insulting comments about him. What's strange is how this aspect of the story, the bullying that came before the violence, has gotten so little attention in discussions about the show. Instead, everyone's focused almost exclusively on the dangers of online radicalization, rather than complex social dynamics that might drive a kid to these communities in the first place. This is a missed opportunity to address a very real problem of bullying and social exclusion that affects so many young men. By acknowledging this part of the story, we might develop better approaches to supporting vulnerable boys before they turn to harmful online communities for validation. History keeps repeating itself. In the 80s, we blamed heavy metal for youth violence. In the 90s, it was video games. Today, it's the manosphere. But moral panics have never solved the real problems. They've only created new ones. And what really worries me is how quickly adolescence has jumped from fiction to influencing real policy. The show's creators have been invited to discussions with UK Parliament and Prime Minister, and they're seriously talking about showing this series to students across the UK. This quick policy response to a fictional drama raises serious concerns about evidence-based decision-making. The creators have admitted themselves adolescence is fiction, but the line between drama and documentary has gotten dangerously blurred in public discussions. There's also a real risk of what researchers call the notoriety effect, where media attention to certain types of violence can actually inspire copycat behavior. By putting this fictional scenario at the center of national attention, we might be creating the very problem that we're trying to prevent. So what if, instead of showing boys a fictional drama about how dangerous they might become, that we invested in giving them the guidance, the support, and positive role models they actually need? Rather than focusing on potential threats, we should be developing constructive ways to support young men as they navigate the challenges of growing up in a digital age. We've got to take mental health seriously, especially for young men who might be reluctant to ask for help. The high rates of suicidal thoughts among isolated young men should be treated as a public health crisis, deserving real attention and real resources. And finally, we need to create safe spaces where boys can talk about their feelings and the challenges that they're coming up against without the fear of being judged. Too often, young men are caught between toxic online spaces and mainstream environments that seem dismissive about their struggles. By providing alternatives, we can help them find community without turning to harmful ideologies. While adolescence has started important conversations about challenges facing young people today, its flawed portrayal risks creating more problems than it solves. By understanding what the show gets wrong, we can move beyond simplistic stories and develop better ways to support young men in the digital age. But addressing these issues takes more than just critiquing a Netflix show. It demands a fundamental shift in how we think about masculinity, mental health, and the unique challenges facing boys today. If you want to better understand how to support the young men in your life without falling into the traps of moral panic or oversimplification, you need to recognize that the challenges they face are complex and often misunderstood. Here's the problem. Most discussions about young men today either demonize them or they completely dismiss their struggles. Without a balanced perspective, it's nearly impossible to provide the guidance that they actually need. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What resonated with you about the analysis? Did I miss anything important about the show or about its implications? Share your experiences in the comments. Whether you're a parent, an educator, or a young person navigating these challenges yourself, your perspective might help others see this issue in a new light. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Stu Murray signing off, and we'll see you next week.